what a semifinal in UEFA Champions League with Real Madrid and Manchester City. And we're going to touch on Real Madrid, but not in the way that you think. By the way, Saturday, May 28th is the final between Liverpool and Real Madrid. Can't wait for that one. But here's the thing, gentlemen. Before that game was even played, Carlo Ancelotti, manager of Real Madrid, spoke to a journalist for a documentary on Amazon Prime. They talked about a bunch of things, tons of topics, you name it. And then whoop, everyone's ears perked up because Canada was mentioned. And let me tell you in what context it was mentioned, because he was asked if he would ever be interested in coaching a national team. And here was his response. Yes, I'd be interested in managing a national team, but now it's premature, certainly not for this World Cup. World Cup 2026, why not? Could be. Canada? I'd love to. Sure. Canada did very well. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you just say that you would perhaps entertain the idea of being the manager for Canada at the 2026 World Cup? Ollie, are we taking this seriously, or are you just like, it's just being nice?
I like to imagine he said it exactly like that, just like that kind of Dr. Evil voice he just did there, like he's plotting this whole thing. I was wondering when this would come up, because Carlo Ancelotti's wife is from Vancouver, and I think he spends part of the year there and has a home there. So I was kind of anticipating that at some point this would come up, that he'd go into not semi-retirement mode, but wanting to be in Canada and wanting to be with his family more, and so there was potentially a fit there, right? Look, I don't think it's something that's obviously going to be imminent in any way. I don't think anyone is calling for Carlo Ancelotti to come in and replace John Herdman anytime soon. I guess it could become a bit interesting, depending on what Herdman decides to do after the 2022 World Cup. And that's the lens that I'm looking at this through. It's not about replacing John Herdman. I don't think anyone has any desire to do that. It's, could John Herdman potentially move on after this year's World Cup, when his stock, if Canada, his stock is already very high. If Canada does well at a World Cup, his stock is going to go through the roof. There could be opportunities for him. There could be things that potentially make him consider, do I want to be a national team coach for another 4 years leading up to that 2026 World Cup? If that happens, then obviously the program could be an interesting position in terms of, who replaces him. And if Carlo Ancelotti is in any way interested, he is going to be right at the top of that list.
It's in the DNA of all Canadians. We love to have our name mentioned, whether it be our city, whether it be our country, and it makes us feel good, like we're being noticed. The kind of forgotten northern neighbors of the United States, like, hey, we exist as well. I think there's a little bit more to it this time around. Canada, by virtue of what they accomplished with players like Davies and David, Canada really, in earnest, is now on the world footballing map. And we've never been able to say that before, at least from a men's national team perspective. The women's team, completely different story. But for a men's team, for a Champions League winning manager, a legend of the game, managed AC Milan, Chelsea, Real, like all the big dogs, for him to mention Canada, it naturally is going to take you back. There's a number of issues at play here, Andy. First and foremost, you think from his perspective, okay, he was married in Vancouver. There's the Canadian tie. He's 62 years of age. His contract with Real Madrid runs through 2024. Okay, maybe there's a bridge. Maybe there's a gap after that where he's done with the grind of the club game, and coaching a national team might make sense. Would it make sense for Canada, though? Of course, if you're linked to a big name manager, at the very least, you need to investigate that. But is Canada in a position to go out and potentially hire the heir apparent of John Herdman, being a manager who right now makes 6 million euros a year? Like, is the organization at a level where it's making enough money, where it's profitable, where does the professional infrastructure to basically surround a manager like that, support him, and put Canada in a position to go on and compete for international glory? All these questions need to be answered right now. I mean, the Canadian Soccer Association really struggled through the pandemic. It hasn't really been talked about, but the vast majority of the revenue that comes into Canada soccer comes through player registrations. There wasn't player registrations for 18 months. Like, it took a huge hit on the Canadian Soccer Association. You had John Herdman running around trying to find people to help support the program, help provide funds to provide best in class, facilities and services and treatment for the players over the course of World Cup qualifying. Is Carlo Ancelotti in a position where he wants to go do that? Herdman also wears multiple hats. He's the technical director. He's dealing with all the age groups coming through. The work that Herdman puts in is Ancelotti in a position where he'd be willing to go out and do that in the Canadian market as well. There's a lot of no's that come to mind when it comes to those answers there. And that's why I believe that this is more of a pipe dream than anything else.
Well, to follow up on that, and I know you're right, and I think it goes with anybody, right? You want your country mentioned, you want your team mentioned. It's always something that you feel like you've now you're climbing up the ladder when people who are at a certain upper echelon start talking about you. But is it as simple as saying, okay, Ancelotti's saying that because his wife is from Vancouver and maybe he's kind of heading into that semi-retirement mode? Or do you look at it, Ollie, as like, you know what, this is a big deal, that this is a high-profile coach? Could there possibly be a domino effect of high-profile coaches talking about the Canadian men's national team?
It is a big deal. It's not just the high-profile coach. It's one of the greatest coaches in the history of the game. He has won every major league in Europe. He's won the Champions League multiple times. He's a huge deal, right? So I think Wheels is absolutely right. There's a lot that goes into coaching Canada that is not just selecting the men's team and picking the tactics. And it can be a very complex world at times. And of course, if you're bringing someone in like Carlo Ancelotti, who doesn't have the kind of knowledge that John Herdman has of that structure and of how everything works in this country, you're going to need to plan for that and mitigate that and have different people in different roles to help with that. But at the same time, again, it's Carlo Ancelotti. Like that is something that is worth, if you have the vacancy and he is interested at some point in the future, you try and make that work, right? You try and figure it out and see if there's a solution that you can come to, because like, just think about this. Like, again, you look at his resume, you look at who he is in world football. Think about the Canadian program like as recently as like 5 years ago, like in the state it was in, the kind of caliber of coach at that point that the program was able to attract. Like it's an insane thing to talk about, that we now could potentially be looking at a manager like this, again, potentially down the roads being interested in this job. I think it's a massive deal, and it's evidence of what the last couple of years under John Herdman have meant to this men's national team.
So let's put our three heads together here and figure out what would need to happen in order for the Canadian Soccer Association to be in a position to hire an Ancelotti at some point.
Well, first thing first, let me ask you this. Okay. Well, let me ask you this before you do your list.
Have a little brainstorm session here.
I know you wanted to, but I think the most obvious question is there going to be a vacancy? And we all know that the players love Herdman. Herdman does an exceptional job. We know Canada Soccer loves Herdman. But let me just start off with this, Garrett. What are the chances that the coaching job for the men's national team is available after Qatar?
Look, it's impossible to predict. And I'm not trying to dodge the question here. It's just that people end up in positions relatively quickly in this game. Things move fast. And this World Cup and the build up to it is a great opportunity for John Herdman to let the world know, beyond what we already understand in this country, what he's all about as a head coach, a manager, a leader. It's not just going to be him behind a microphone. It's just how he gets the most out of this team. It's just such a great opportunity for him. I think that he should be aware of that as well. And if everything goes to plan and the world takes notice about what this gem we have coaching the men's national team, then there could be other offers. But will there be? What would interest John Herdman? I keep on saying this. If I'm the Vancouver Whitecaps, I hand over the keys to that club. And some people might say, well, maybe John wants to go overseas. Maybe he has bigger ambitions. He lives in the Vancouver area. Like, taking full control of a club side in Major League Soccer, a team that a league that's growing leaps and bounds, I would just let him be in charge of my operation and just basically say, go and make this club successful, bring it to a level where it should be. Does that opportunity come about? I don't know. I honestly have no clue. I don't think any of us do. There's no imminent plans for him to leave. The only other outside circumstance other than him being plucked by someone else would be, let's see who's hired as next general secretary of the Canadian Soccer Association. Like, the CSA needs to grow, needs to become best in class, needs to become more professional. if he's fighting an uphill battle each and every week over 4 years, leading into the home World Cup in 2026, is that something that he wants to go through? Banging his head on the wall for funds, fighting for what he needs? I'm not sure that anyone wants to deal with that. So those are the two things that I look out for.
Yeah, I just think unless the World Cup is an absolute catastrophe, I think Herdman will probably have a decision to make at some point somewhere. I think some club around the world is going to look at what he's done with this program and see, a really attractive coach there for them, whether it's someone like the Vancouver Whitecaps. I agree. It seems like a no-brainer for them if there's an opportunity to put something convincing in front of him. Or even if it's something like going back to England, right? Like, I'm not saying he's going to walk straight into the Premier League, but there's a lot of big clubs outside the Premier League that need that kind of builder, right? That needs someone with a vision to, to really put some foundations in place. So I just think, I don't know where it's going to be, whether it's MLS, Europe, or whatever. I think someone is going to approach him and make an offer based on what he's done so far. And at that point, he's going to have a decision to make.